It's remarkable, that journey. How many of you have seen that before? Does it ever get old? No. I've seen it a few times, and it's just beautiful every time. And each time you take something different. So thank you for being here this evening. My name is Wendy Lynn-Bartles, and I work for a leadership program on campus. And we actually train professionals across the state of Florida in managing conflict and contentious issues. So this is one of the issues we have in fact studied. And it was a pleasure last year when I met Tom. He came to talk to some of the participants in our course. And we learned a whole lot about blind crayfish. It was pretty remarkable. So it's a great honor to be here with this panel. I am not going to go into some long introductions, but of course you recognize Tom, who was in the movie, and he is a biologist and a cave diver, and he has his own company in town, Karst Environmental Services. Is that right? And then on the far side, we have Tessa Skiles, who is a conservation photographer, and she has plenty of stories to share with you today. And then on this end of the panel, we have Greg Owen, who works for the government, our local government, Alachua County Environmental Protection Department. And so, I guess, would you like to offer any other kinds of introductions, or shall we just get started? Just get started? Sure. So, my first question, the way this is going to work, we have just over half an hour, and we're going to take a few minutes to hear responses from our panelists to the movie itself, and then we'll open up for questions from the audience. And I know that they're going to put some instructions up for you so that you can text your questions in, and if you don't have the capacity or the smartphone or anything, we'll take questions from the audience too. Okay? How does that sound? Good? Okay, so, when was the film made, Tom?
I knew you were going to ask that.
Some years ago, right?
About 2000.
It was released back in
2004. Okay, so what are we in now? 2020. So there's some time has gone past. So perhaps I'd like to start with a question about changes. Yeah.
You guys can share that. We'll share.
Okay. So if you could just speak to any changes that have happened since that movie was made in terms of water quality and protection.
The changes have all been for the worse. Like the best management practices, a lot of our karst areas they don't have swamps on them. It's a very dry landscape. You can farm the things from wall to wall. There's nothing to stop you from putting almost every acre into agriculture. And I think the best management practices are good. I think we'd be worse off if we didn't have them. There's something like 11,000 agricultural operations that have joined the best management practice. And it's a voluntary program. You don't have to do it, but there are certain benefits for the agriculturalists that they do. There's a thing called BMAPs, Basic Management Action Plans, and they can get a lot of mileage if they've already established best management practices. But we have an expanding world population, an expanding Florida population, and people have to eat. And we're just seeing more and more agricultural expansion in all of our in the Florida landscape. A lot of areas that used to be in silviculture, growing pine trees, which is a fairly benign activity as far as water quality and quantity goes. Those things have been converted almost wholesale to center pivot irrigation systems. So we just got more and more agriculture. And Florida soils are so stinking sandy. In fact, all over the southeast, there's a kind of a rule of thumb with the farmers in the southeast. They say that you're never any more than 3 days from a drought. Our soils are so sandy you can have a terrific thunderstorm, right? And just soaked the place, and 3 days later, things are dried out. That water just slips right on down. And the sandy soils also do not hold on to nutrients. And so the Aggies have a saying that the nutrients follow the water, or entrained in the water. And so we have these sandy soils, the water slips right onto them and carries the nutrients with it into the groundwater. And of course, the springs are where that groundwater emerges, and a lot of our worst water quality problems are right there near the spring, right at the spring vents. We've got the overgrowth now, nuisance growth of algae that we didn't used to have back before the 1990s. And so we need to do a lot more. I think we're probably better off, but we do have the best management practices. And you know, the problems in Florida aren't just restricted to our springs and the rivers that are fed by the springs. We've also got problems in South Florida with the movement of water out of Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades agricultural area out to the coast. And they've been having these red tides and lots of other problems faced because of water pollution down there. Probably the most successful part of the best management practice program is in the Everglades agricultural area. That's 772,000 acres. It's a muck farm, and they have absolute delicate control over the movement of water and nutrients in that system. And so the best management practices have worked best right there. The rest of the state is a little more difficult. Of course, this is all non-point source pollution, right? It's not like it's a sewage outfall pipe where you can gather that stuff up and do something with it. This is just coming from everywhere. So far, not so good. We're not seeing a lot of improvement in the water quality. The DEP would like to, back before the white folks got to Florida, there were no wells in Florida. Right now, there's thousands and thousands of them, and each one of those is like a little straw into the aquifer. And so any water that comes up that straw tends not to go out of springs. So we've seen about a 20% decline on average in most of our spring flow. And of course, we've seen the decline in water quality also. 28% since 2000, Tessa says. So, yeah.
Maybe, Tessa, what change did you see?
Well, to reiterate, not many, but I do agree with Tom. Having the BMPs in place is definitely a good thing. It's just that they haven't achieved much of anything. Specifically in the Santa Fe and Suwanee basins, like that were mentioned in the film, there has been no improvement. We haven't seen any improvement at all from these practices. They haven't even been proven to be effective state. I mean, well, I think in the Everglades certainly, but not for springs, to my knowledge, that they've been proven to be effective in reducing nitrogen loading. So it's a nice thought. I think it's good that we have farmers thinking about it, and that we have that conversation open, but it needs to be improved. It needs to be improved, bottom line.
And maybe
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes since this film came out, and I will say, I saw this film in 2002 when I was in high school, so I think it maybe came out 1 year, yeah. And I did see it again, as Tom said, it still is relevant today. I saw it again about a year ago in one of my classes at UF, one of my graduate classes there. So congrats on that. I think one of the major changes that has happened though since this film came out is the population growth in the state of Florida, and it's going to continue to grow. We've got to figure out a way that we're going to feed all these people and have enough water for everybody. I think maybe 4 or 5 million new people have moved to the state since that time, and we're going to grow even more.
I wanted to add something to that too.
In regards to BMPs and BMAPs, they do not account for future growth in the state or in agriculture. So.
Yeah, and some other things that we didn't have in place at the time that this film came out were some of the minimum flows and levels weren't set on the Santa Fe River. So now there is like a framework for a flow regime, basically the amount of water that we want to set aside for the environment. So that's new. I mean, there's definitely issues with that, but I think that legally there are some protections that have been set forth since then. There's also best management action plans, which these guys are talking about, the BMPs, those are best management practices. There's also basin management action plans, so that's where the state is coming in and saying, hey, we want to reduce nutrients going to springs. And that's why so much of this talk about BMPs are to reduce the nutrients. So those are a couple new things. I think also in Alachua County, we've strengthened some of our water quality codes. We have fertilizer restrictions here, so there's a winter ban. You're not supposed to use fertilizers on your lawn. We've also strengthened some of the wetland codes, and we do enforcement of irrigation restrictions because a big water use is outside on the lawns, and a lot of people don't think about their connection to our water source.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought the lawn up. They estimate that something like 50% of the water use in the typical Florida home is spent out on the lawns. And we use something like, can you remember how many gallons a day the typical Floridian is using?
In this area, it's like 170, is that right?
Something like that.
That's a lot of water. Imagine 55-gallon drums full of water, right? Each one of us tends to use that much water every day. And the bulk of that is out there on the lawn. The lawn's a horrible thing if you like spring runs. Yes.
Yes. So I'll just try to recap what we heard. Water quality seems worse, right? Water quantity, we have issues with flow, and you'll probably notice that to understand or to be able to have a conversation about this, you have to learn a lot of acronyms, BMPs, BMAPs, MFLs, TMDLs, I mean it just goes on, and we should have a cheat sheet actually somewhere for those acronyms, but I will ask people to define your acronyms. And one thing, you talked a little bit about the non-point source pollution. Can you just tell us, for people who don't maybe know exactly what you're talking about, what is that?
Yeah, there are what they call point sources of pollution. That would be something like a factory that has a big pipe discharging water from their operation. And point source points of pollution are somewhat easy to deal with because you can grab that stuff up right then and treat it or whatever it is you want to do to it, right? Non-point is just stuff that's coming from all over the place in the landscape. It's coming out of our lawns, it's coming out of septic tanks, it's just runoff off the highways, runoff from agricultural fields, and that's a much more difficult problem to deal with. It's a general landscape problem. You know, the truth of the matter is our aquifer now, the pollution is almost ubiquitous. We've got, back before, a long time ago, you could hardly measure the amount of nitrates and other nutrients in our groundwater. And now some of them are well up over the drinking water standards. The feds tell us that we shouldn't drink groundwater that has any more than 10 parts per million nitrates in it. Some of the springs along the Suwanee River are kicking out something like 30 parts per million nitrates. So you can't even drink your groundwater up there, right? You need to buy water from somewhere else. But that's the difference in point source and non-point.
And so one of the things that was raised by the panel is population growth. We all know I think there's 1,000 people moving to Florida a day, 950. So that's coming, but something hopeful is that there are some frameworks out there that have been developed by the Environmental Protection Department, and so there are some accountability frameworks that are out there. So I do have another question about the Floridan aquifer. You know, it's invisible because, you know, we can't see it, it's underneath the surface, and I'm sure that some people have a lot of misconceptions about it. And so I wonder if you have heard of misconceptions that people have about the Floridan aquifer. And Tessa, if you could tell us if you've heard anything about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first and the biggest is that it's where we get our groundwater from. I think our biggest enemy in protecting our water here in Florida is that people don't understand where their water comes from. I call myself a springs conservationist, but really the fact of the matter is that we're working to conserve not just our springs but our drinking water. That's a lot more pressing issue when we realize what Tom just mentioned, that it's being polluted past the safe levels of consumption, 10 parts per million. And I think that's the most stage, just general lack of knowledge about those systems. The best thing that you can do is educate people about where the water comes from. I actually brought this package right here is a notice that I got from our neighborhood just today that says your residential water supply may contain more than H2O. We are testing the waters for homeowners of this area. Please send in your water sample. And people don't realize that this is happening all over the place, and you're lucky if you actually find out about it. So I'd say that's the biggest about the aquifer, and that it runs almost everywhere underneath our feet.
Yeah, back when I was a kid, if you went to Silver Springs and rode glass bottom boats, they would tell you that the water coming out of Silver Springs fell to the earth up in North Carolina, the Smoky Mountains, right? It makes a long journey all the way from Georgia down to us.
Not anymore.
Well, that's a big misconception. It's basically all local rainfall. And the hydrologists here in the state have tried to map out the groundwater watersheds. Silver Springs, we used to say it had a 750 square mile watershed, so all the rainfall falling on that 750 square miles eventually works its way to Silver Springs. And we get about 52 inches of rainfall a year right up here, but evapotranspiration wipes out about 40 inches of that. So there's about a dozen inches left right to infiltrate down into the soil and recharge the aquifer. We're very lucky here. If you go to the Midwest or places in California and Australia, they are busy overpumping their aquifers and drawing them down. Sometimes in places they've gone down scores and scores of feet. And that's unsustainable. Sooner or later, they're going to have to give up the type of agriculture they're doing that requires that groundwater. We're really, really lucky here in Florida that we have such a porous landscape, right? And our aquifer is recharged so readily and so nicely. Yeah.
What about you?
Well, being a scientist, I think one of the biggest misconceptions that I see is the oversimplification of the issues plaguing our springs. So for a long time, it's been that nitrates are the major driver of algal growth in the springs. And we've learned a lot since even this film came out. And the ecosystem of the springs is so much more complex than just nutrient loading causing algal growth. We know that it has something to do with the flows and velocities. So as we overpump our aquifer, we're getting less water and less strength and velocity of that flow coming out of there. I think we saw some pretty big boils in that film, and I heard Tessa say we don't really see that anymore. So that leads to growth, and they've noticed that at Silver Springs, where when flows declined, they had a lot of algae in it, and it went back up, and that algae was washed away. And we've also seen it in scientific research. And we think it might also have something to do with grazing control, top-down control from grazers, from little microorganisms or snails that could control the algae in the springs. So a lot of things have changed, and this system is so complex. I think the narrative of just nitrates causing this algal growth is a oversimplification. We'd be naive to believe that if we just reduce the nutrients going to the springs, they're going to return to their former glory.